And those models are subject of days to discuss probably. They are already presented in working groups. So it's not our task now to present in details, but I wanted you to be aware of how you can easily handle the creation of the XMLs that you need to. For example, I can show you how an MDR device with the implantable and a system device can look like accordingly to the model you saw. Because, okay, a device, it's a combination of a basic UDI and a UDI DI. So we expect in this XML, which only describe one device, to find the two parts of the data. Okay. So this is an MDR device, XML, as you should create when you send our data. It's a big one. Devices are very big, but if you notice the type, it's a MDR device. Those are some schema location and XML points that you need to add it as they are here. But we are interested what is inside. So inside this MDR device, you will see that there are two main tags, MDR basic UDI and MDR UDI DI data. And inside there is the conformant XML with the data specified in our model. So MDR basic UDI has a correspondence with MDR basic UDI type in XSDs. And of course, here you have the tags identifier, you have certificate links, you have some device data, you have the manufacturer, you have the applicable legislation, and so on. So all the properties that you saw into the graphic, the UML schema, and they are mentioned in XSDs, you need to add them in the XML. And at the end, you need to validate your XML against the XSDs that we provided. That's for we have these namespaces here in order for you to validate your schema. So this is the first check that you need to do it on your side in order to increase the chances to send us some consistent data, and our validation and business validation will not fail. So if you send us an inconsistent data, so for example, you send some data that is not valid against our XSDs, our data exchange service will reject your message, and you will receive an acknowledgement saying that we could not read your data that you are sending. Mind that in this model also you have constraints in the way of number of, it can be the case of number of entities that you send, the number of, if it's mandatory or not a field. If there is a list of, I don't know, the comments, you might have a list of comments, you need to add them in a specific tags. So we advise to provide for you to be very careful when you create those XMLs, and of course, it would be much better if you can use some programming tools to automatically generate those XMLs. We are using this, so programmatically it's possible to generate those data. Of course, there is also the MDR UDI data, which you have also details. As there are two data inside a grouping MDR device, MDR UDI data has also a reference to the identifier of the basic UDI, even if they are in the same group, because there might be services that will accept only UDI DI data and not MDR data. But those services will be next topic from us. So this can look an XML in compliant with the XSDs that we provide. We try in data exchange to stick as much as possible with the same naming conventions that you have in your working group, so the same as communicated to the business documents that you produce or you took part into the working group. So the similarities should be very, very high. In the current presentation, there are many examples. So you can also, receiving the presentation, you can see some samples. Some of them are with some, we try to be as much as possible in a real situation. So those from this side, there are some of them that will be in the service model that are more auto-generated samples, but the data is valid and it should be. Okay. Into our documents, we will provide also the services that Udamed can support. It will be a Word document where you will find the services that you might access. There will be many services. One of the services can look like this one. You might see that there will be a service name. There will be an operation. For example, the device service can have an operation of download. So you need to add this in our service model, expressing what service you need to access. It would be the device service, what operation you need to access a download. Of course, here it's an indicative information on what profile will be allowed to access this service. And of course, if you want to download some data, you might be able to send us some criteria of searching, so to limit the list of entities that you will receive. Criteria, you have it here. There are fields that are directly connected with the model, with the data model. So you can search, in this case, for example, on the manufacturer code, the authorized representative code, or you can search based on a specific version in a DI code of UDI, DI data, or whatever other possibilities. For the playground, maybe not all the criteria will be available, but will be enough implementation in order for you to play with some criteria queries. For example, device service will be available for competent authorities and notified bodies. Also, to express this criteria, you need to instruct this to an object that it's in the service model. I will show you. It's a DI download service criteria type, for example, where you fill in what are the data that you search. And of course, in the last column, there are the
How are you today?
Payloads
good.
that you might receive accordingly to the search in Udamed database. And you see that there are the main entities that
we have
you
some, because
receive,
when we will
device,
talk to
but also
Indigo,
you can receive some
what
links
is going
to
on,
some related entities.
I
For
said
example,
when we will discuss with Indigo about the data flow,
clinical
investigation
IDs,
info to
and so on.
to etc.
Mind, the services are shaped around the main entity, and of course the other entities are refers only to in majority of the cases, to an identifier to the other entity. So for example, in order to see a specific certificate, you will access a certificate service that will probably be created later on, and having the certificate identifier, you can download information about a specific certificate. So you will receive only to this service, for example, you will receive only a link to a certificate, and then accessing another service, you can access this data. This will be a service. So to access a specific service, you need to shape a very clear message instructing what is the service you need to access and what is the data that you need to send to us. And all this data, it's presented in the service model, where there are the main types of messages, types that we expect from you, is the push message. Those are in blue. Is the push message when you want to submit to us some data, or it's the pull request when you want to download some data, to request some data from Udamed. And the messages that you will receive will be an acknowledgement in case of a push, or a pull response in case of a pull request. As you see, those messages have some common information, that there are some information around the messaging itself. There are some IDs that needs to be passed, which are explained in the documents that we create. Without those, it's very hard to understand which reply you have to which initial message. So for example, a correlation ID is used for this, but you will have a lot of insight in the documents that you receive. Also, the services that you will be able to access are described here in this enum, where you will, if you want to access an actor registration service or an actor, you need to specify this in the service ID, and of course in the service operation, and you need to specify the operation itself, it's a GET or a PETCH or a POST. So only the valid combinations will make sense for Udamed, and the valid combination are provided by the service repository that we talked early on. How we glue a service and entities, here it's a very basic way. If you, for example, if you want to push, let's say, some devices, you need to create a push message. Inside the push message, you will have some service information about the sender, about the recipient. It's important the recipient, we are the recipient, in your case, when you send us some data, but you need to specify what service you want to invoke. And of course, in the payload of the push, you will add one or many entities of a specific type. So you can add many IVDR devices, or a combination between IVDR devices and MDR devices, and so on. So we don't have limitations on the way you can mix the data, but it needs to be of a specific type, and in service model, those payloads are described, so you cannot send whatever you want in the payload. You need to stick with some specific information that we are exchanging into, we are added in the XSDs. So all those data on how to send the data and how to shape the data, to model the data, are inside the XSDs, and it's good to have the first look into the diagrams, because there it's the overall and it's everything. Those diagrams are one-to-one with the XSDs that you will receive.